Have you ever been bored building for exhibit animals in Planet Zoo? Because I know I sure have. This video aims to help you overcome that boredom and exhaustion for building for exhibit animals in these tiny little boxes here. They can seem pretty limiting at first, but if you apply the same creativity that you do to habitat animals, you might just be able to find yourself using them more and more naturally while playing the game. My first tip may sound a little bit controversial, but it actually works for the goal here. This tip would be to avoid houses. What I'm talking about are things like a reptile house or a bug house, any of those generic houses. They may be the most realistic, and you definitely see them at zoos you go to in real life, and I know everyone's built for them in their realistic zoo, but realism isn't necessarily the goal here. The goal is to get you actually using this feature of the game. If we look at this house here, I know it's gorgeous, right? What we're seeing is a bunch of exhibits lined up all next to each other. It's pretty monotonous, and I know a lot of you build these amazing houses and even include a habitat animal in it like a caiman, but still, it's monotonous, and you're not making any of the exhibit animals stand out. The only thing that you do make stand out is the habitat animal, and that's what it's time to change. So the first tip in avoiding houses means make something that is unique. Pick one exhibit animal that you really like and make something that stands out. My example for this is the red-eyed tree frog. I took one animal that seemed really cool and that I definitely thought I could build for, and I created an entire room just for it, almost like it was a habitat animal. So you can see I have a conservation board here. The outside is very, very decorated, and then if you go on the inside, we have our exhibit here. You know, it may not be the most spectacular thing in the world, but I had a really, really fun time building this, and this is something that I would definitely incorporate into my South American section of a zoo. And you could do this with any animal. You can overly theme it, incorporate it into your section, but the real goal here is to, instead of make a South America house, I'm focusing specifically on the frog and doing things that I thought would fit this specific species. You don't necessarily have to just limit yourself to one species. You could do 2 or maybe even up to 5, but if you're making a generic house and lining exhibits up next to each other, you're probably going to get pretty bored pretty fast. My next tip is to avoid realism. I know a lot of us like to make these hyper-realistic zoos, and that's really, really fun. But again, the goal isn't necessarily to make the best zoo in the world. It's to get yourself in the habit of using exhibit animals. They're a huge feature in this game, and they deserve more love. So when avoiding realism, we can get really cool structures like this. I used, as you can tell, mostly the Twilight pack, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I chose 2 animals here that I thought had some relation to each other, and I built a really cool structure and courtyard around it. This is an area you might see dedicated to a habitat animal, but instead we have 2 cool exhibit animals, and it doesn't really take up that much space. You can see I have this little medieval tower here, a nice viewing and some benches. This might even be a great place for a little food court. And then if you go up here, it's like getting a second viewing in a habitat, but instead you get a nice viewing of a green iguana here. Again, this is by no means realistic, but I had a lot of fun building this, and that's the goal. It makes me want to build for these animals again. Even though the theme doesn't necessarily relate to them, it may relate to the theme of my zoo, and I personally like building fantasy stuff, so this was a really fun way to make these exhibit animals stand out. My third suggestion here is to incorporate exhibit animals into your habitat animal space. This is actually something that is done realistically in a lot of zoos all the time. I just chose at random here a maned wolf habitat, and then I chose another animal that I wanted to incorporate. Since I gave the maned wolves a little pond here, I decided to incorporate an aquatic animal, the axolotl. And so now it looks like we're looking through the pond of the axolotl, and it continues into the maned wolf habitat here. It's fun because you can look through this and see the habitat animal as well as the exhibit animal just chilling out right here. I think this is a really cute idea, and it requires a lot less effort than making a standalone habitat like these here. You don't necessarily have to make an entire building or area. You can totally do that, but it's an easy add-on, and again, it gets you thinking about how you can incorporate these animals and make them a feature instead of an afterthought, especially when you're coming at it from this angle. It's not necessarily tucked in a corner that you can miss. This stands out on its own, as well as the maned wolf. They're not necessarily competing for attention, they're just 2 separate things you can look at. Another thing that you can consider doing is breaking the rules a little bit. Here, I've stacked 3 desert terrariums next to each other. I just simply placed exhibit animals in each one, and then decorated them all accordingly. Obviously, you're still going to get this box here, but I just didn't want to use mods for of this video, but if you use the null exhibit animal mod, this can be fixed pretty easily. I covered up some of the repetitive elements like the same sticks here, and I incorporated some natural features. I used the nice new branches we got from the Twilight pack, as well as some cactus and some saltwort bushes to decorate this and make it feel like it's one cohesive habitat, that the lizard could potentially walk across. I also recommend, if you're able to use mods, using the exhibit prop pack. This is going to give you a lot of items here that can help out in decorating these exhibit animals. It makes them a lot more interesting, and you don't necessarily have to limit yourself to syncing items in from the unmodded catalog. Personally, I use this mod pack a lot when creating small terrariums. I obviously didn't use mods in this demonstration here, just to show that anyone, even without mods, can make a really cool looking terrarium, but this is definitely an added bonus and gives you so many more options, so I highly recommend that, especially if you want to start using more exhibit animals in your game. Last tip I have here is to actually combine multiple of these pointers. You can combine multiple exhibits together, put them in front of a habitat, not limit yourself to realism, and build something fantastical and maybe even medieval, and you can even build a standalone area. If you combine a couple or even more of these tips, you'll probably have a lot more fun building for exhibit animals. Making this video, I spent way more time building than I actually intended to, especially on something like this frog temple here. I thought this is going to be a quick 15-minute build, but I spent a lot more time on that because I was genuinely enjoying myself, and I hope that this video helps you guys feel the same. Exhibit animals are a part of this game, and we get one every couple of packs, so we should really love and cherish them as we do the habitat animals. So if this video helped you, make sure to subscribe to see more content like this, and I'd love to see what creative things you guys come up with.